Welcome to the Tim Booker channel, spreading the wisdom of virtue. Wishing you an enjoyable listening experience. The book we are discussing today is called The Lean Startup. Before talking about this book, let me pose a question to you. Suppose your company needs to send 100 standardized invitation letters to 100 customers. You're responsible for this task, and you have 100 envelopes, 100 sheets of paper, and 100 stamps. How would you send them out most quickly? Would you perform 3 actions for each letter: insert the paper, seal the envelope, and affix the stamp, or would you first focus on inserting all 100 sheets into envelopes, then seal them, and finally, affix the stamps? Many people might instinctively opt for the latter approach, concentrating on each step in bulk. It seems logical, but in reality, the reverse is true. Sending them out one by one is faster. Why am I sharing this example, and what does it have to do with the book we're discussing today? Well, this book is practically a textbook in the world of startups, particularly for many internet product managers in startup companies who often refer to it as the Red Bible. So, what does it teach? In simple terms, the core principle of this book is to emphasize that in the field of startups, tackling tasks one by one is more efficient than mass repetition. After listening to today's book, you'll understand why the answer is different from what you might have initially thought. Specifically, this book presents several key points. First, lean startup advocates using the smallest cost and the fastest speed for trial and error. Second, at the core of lean startup is the validation of value and growth assumptions. Third, lean startup is not just a theory for entrepreneurship, it also applies to other fields beyond startups. Let's start by looking at the first point. Lean startup is about trying with the minimum cost and the fastest speed. This essentially introduces us to the concept of lean startup. We will explain this concept in detail shortly. However, before delving into the concept of lean startup, let's briefly review the traditional approach to entrepreneurship. In the past, entrepreneurial companies, especially those that rose to prominence in the 1970s and 1980s, such as Microsoft, followed a simple path. A few technical experts would gather, study competitors' products, identify weaknesses, and then create a better product. They would work in seclusion, quietly writing code, and after a year, they'd release a software product to the market, making a big impact. Even today, Microsoft's Windows operating system updates still follow a similar pattern. Thousands of engineers work behind closed doors, spend 2 years developing a new version like Windows 8, then another 2 years for Windows 10, and so on. You might notice that this approach is somewhat like launching a rocket. A group of scientists, hidden away in a research facility, continuously experiments. The public doesn't know what they're doing until one day they announce that they've developed a rocket and are ready to launch. This is similar to how entrepreneurship used to work before modern internet companies emerged. However, it has a problem: it's disconnected from the market, isolated, and distant from customers and users. The concept of lean startup flips this approach on its head. Instead of rushing a group of experts into isolation to work on a project, you first need to ensure that the market genuinely needs what you're working on. If people don't need it, all the effort is a waste. The scientific way to approach this is through lean startup thinking, which involves taking small steps, moving quickly, and iterating rapidly. In essence, this means starting with the simplest, most basic product that has just one core function, and then observing how people react to it. If the response is positive, you invest more effort into improving the product step by step based on user feedback until it becomes a great product. If the initial, rudimentary version of the product doesn't resonate with users, you abandon it. Clearly, the lean startup method is more scientific. Startups love it because they lack the resources of mature companies. Large companies can afford to make mistakes and waste resources, but startups can't. Startups must be cautious, iterate quickly, and gradually perfect their products to win users. This is the essence of lean startup. At this point, you might be forming an impression of what lean startup means. You might think it's just a methodology suited for modern-day entrepreneurs who stumble into pitfalls and learn from their mistakes, eventually formulating this method. However, lean startup is not a recent creation from the world of tech startups. The concept of lean startup originated from traditional industry, and it was a giant of a company that introduced it, Toyota, the Japanese automotive manufacturer. Toyota initially introduced the concept of lean manufacturing. What does that mean? It means maintaining a small-scale production operation, correcting errors immediately, and avoiding overproduction. Toyota entered the automobile industry relatively late, competing against established giants like Ford and General Motors. These large companies were already highly specialized, using enormous machines to produce thousands of identical parts at once. However, Toyota used smaller machines to produce fewer parts at a time, and the process was less specialized. Many different parts were made on the same machine. While Toyota could only produce in small batches and couldn't directly compete with the big players, they had an advantage. They could produce diverse, unique cars more easily. Think about it, the big automakers produced a large quantity of identical cars. If a certain market didn't like their car model, they couldn't adjust quickly. But Toyota was different. They could use their small machines to make each car unique. This allowed them to capture a portion of the market and compete with the major manufacturers. Plus, they could adjust much faster and at a lower cost. It's quite simple. If Toyota realized a particular car model wasn't performing well, they could immediately stop production. But for big automakers, once they decided on a model, they had to produce hundreds of thousands before they could consider changes. Over time, this ability allowed Toyota to enter more significant markets. By 2008, they had overtaken General Motors to become the world's largest car manufacturer. Now, can you see the connection between this example and the earlier one about sealing envelopes? You now understand why sealing individual envelopes can be faster than doing it in bulk. While repeating the same task seems efficient, we often overlook the hidden time involved. In batch processing, you must first arrange the envelopes, paper, and stamps properly, and this takes time. Additionally, if an unexpected issue arises, like finding that the paper doesn't fit the envelopes, you must backtrack, wasting even more time. On the other hand, with small batch processing, you notice problems immediately and can fix them on the spot, avoiding future repetitions of the same mistake. So, returning to Toyota's lean manufacturing example, it showed that even in traditional industries, adopting the lean startup approach of small steps, rapid iteration, and fast trial and error can be beneficial. The author emphasizes that not only entrepreneurs forming teams to launch startups but also individuals responsible for new products in large companies and those in traditional industries needing innovation can benefit from this lean startup philosophy. So, lean startup is a comprehensive concept with deep roots in various industries, offering a scientific approach to entrepreneurship that values agility, quick adjustments, and iterative progress. After discussing the concept of lean startup, let's take a look at the second point of this book, how to execute lean startup. The author believes that the core of lean startup is validating the value hypothesis and the growth hypothesis. In simple terms, entrepreneurship is about identifying a problem that users have, providing a solution, having users accept your solution, and then making money. Most entrepreneurs are good at identifying problems, but few can answer this question: why do you think your solution is what users want? As mentioned earlier, the lean startup approach is about validating whether this idea is feasible. However, when it comes to practical implementation, how far should you validate it? In this regard, the author introduces a crucial concept in this book: implicit assumptions. Implicit assumptions are the premises that we are not aware of. For example, when we meet a new friend and say, "Let's exchange WeChat contacts," we assume that they use WeChat. We don't first ask, "Do you have WeChat?" We just assume it. This hidden assumption is not always correct, and you must verify it by asking if they have WeChat. This kind of hidden assumption is a common mistake made by entrepreneurs. The lean startup approach is like asking, "Do you have WeChat?" It helps entrepreneurs avoid making assumptions. So, how do you verify these implicit assumptions in lean startup? We break them down into two aspects: the value hypothesis and the growth hypothesis. First, let's look at the value hypothesis. This is about determining whether your product or feature is valuable to users. Before you start working on something, you must validate this assumption. For example, a startup in India wanted to offer laundry services because many people couldn't afford washing machines. They assumed people would use their service. To validate this, they loaded a washing machine onto a truck and visited villages to see if people were interested. After a week of testing in different locations, they realized that people weren't interested because they feared the truck might drive away with their clothes. This feedback allowed them to adjust their approach and eventually succeed. Another example is a Silicon Valley startup that added a social feature to its online education platform, assuming it would make learning more enjoyable. However, users didn't like it. They didn't want social interactions while learning. This was a failure to validate the value hypothesis. Why is it essential to validate the value hypothesis? Because, as entrepreneurs, we often have biases and assumptions. Before giving a product or feature to users, we have zero knowledge of how they will react. Therefore, we need to validate whether our product is genuinely valuable. To do this, you create a minimum viable product, MVP, a simple, low-cost version of your product with only the core functionality. Then, you observe how users react to it. If they respond positively, you continue to improve it. If not, you know it's not what they want, and you can pivot or abandon it. The second aspect is the growth hypothesis. Once you've validated the value hypothesis and obtained user approval, you need to verify if your product can be used by more users and if your existing users will help spread the word. This is another assumption that needs validation. For example, Google's keyword advertising initially cost very little, and Eric Ries' company allocated $5 per day for Google AdWords. They observed how many new users this brought in and tracked their interactions. This allowed them to validate the growth hypothesis. In summary, validating both the value hypothesis and the growth hypothesis is crucial for lean startup success. These validations should not be a one-time effort but a continuous process as you update and improve your product. It helps ensure you're on the right track and not making assumptions based on vanity metrics. This is the essence of lean startup thinking regarding how to implement lean startup. The third point of this book is that lean startup is not just a theory for entrepreneurship, it is also applicable to fields beyond entrepreneurship. Some people might think there's too much talk about how to start a business, but the world is vast, and only a few will actually start businesses. Why should they bother learning how to do lean startup, and what's the use? In reality, even though this is a book about entrepreneurship, it is suitable for anyone who takes their work seriously. After reading this book, I have a clear sense that it's not fundamentally about entrepreneurship. Instead, it conveys a mindset for how to view the world and a methodology for doing things scientifically. This is applicable even to those who are not entrepreneurs. The book provides numerous real-life scenarios to illustrate this point. Let me share a few examples. For instance, if you are a primary school math teacher and want your students to learn faster, how can you apply the lean startup approach? Traditional teaching materials are standardized, and it's challenging to create custom materials for each student. Trying new teaching methods for an entire class can be risky. However, tools like Shuexiao Zong Dong Yuan, a teaching platform, allow teachers to record video lessons tailored to individual students based on their levels and learning styles. With this tool, you can experiment with new teaching methods on a small scale, observe their effectiveness, and then scale them up if they work. This mirrors the iterative process of lean startup. Another example is how lean startup thinking can be applied to TV drama production. Instead of committing to an entire season up front, producers can film a pilot episode, gather a small audience for a test screening, and adjust the storyline based on their feedback before deciding whether to proceed. This approach minimizes the risk and cost of producing a full season without knowing if it will resonate with viewers. It's a typical lean startup method. Even hospital laboratories can benefit from lean startup thinking. Instead of collecting and processing blood samples from multiple patients over an hour, they could process smaller batches as they come in. This reduces patient waiting times and the risk of errors due to large batch processing. Lastly, consider a business selling car parts. Instead of purchasing a large quantity of each item and holding it in stock, they could employ the lean startup principle. They'd stock fewer units of each part and replenish them as they sell. This approach might seem inconvenient, but it reduces the risk of carrying excess inventory and incurring storage costs. It also allows for faster identification and resolution of quality issues with specific parts. In conclusion, the book, Lean Startup, introduces the concept of lean startup, emphasizing low-cost, small-batch production to adapt to rapidly changing markets and avoid the waste associated with traditional approaches. It guides us through the path of validating value and growth hypotheses while cautioning against falling into the trap of vanity metrics. Furthermore, it offers insights into applying lean startup principles to various aspects of life. This book ultimately provides a new way of thinking about the world, particularly in our fast-paced, efficiency-driven era. If you're an entrepreneur, it's even more relevant as it prompts you to reevaluate your decisions, challenge unverified assumptions, and avoid chasing false prosperity through misleading data metrics. Thank you for listening to this book every day. Congratulations on completing another book. We appreciate your support and attention. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker Channel audiobook channel, like, and share it with your family and friends. Wisdom is worth spreading, and it opens the door to a brighter future. Thank you, and goodbye.